What leaders need to start doing is understanding what the trend is in behavior and in human-computer interaction, and not try to force it back, but try to figure out creative ways to leverage what's happening at that moment. The best leaders out there, the strongest CEOs out there, are the ones that are out there leveraging the technology. They're getting their messaging out there.
Welcome to the Workplace Theater Podcast, where we explore the joy, the pain, the comedy, and human connections that make up the world of work culture. In this episode, our guest Sal Camarda explores the impact of social media on workplace culture, and whether social media is an overall net positive or net negative. Our hosts, Chris, Michelle, Joe, and Julius, share their insights while offering practical advice on navigating workplace culture. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into the fascinating world of workplace theater.
Welcome to the Workplace Theater Podcast. How's everybody doing today?
It is a wonderful day.
Doing great.
Yeah, it was
Cool.
beautiful. There was no traffic this morning. I'm like, this is fantastic. I wish every day was like this.
Yeah.
A little bit of construction, but you know.
Clearly you weren't coming from the Northwest side.
I was.
Oh, you were?
There was just construction. That's nothing compared to what.
That's true.
What's every other time.
Well, as long as we weren't on the 90.
Yeah, I was down
Nice.
the 90. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad.
Sal, welcome to the podcast. So thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. So today's episode topic is the impact of social media on workplace culture. Can social media actually improve workplace productivity? So we brought you in, Sal, today to talk about this. But before we actually get started, one thing we like to do is we want to start the podcast off with a headline. Sometimes it connects, sometimes it doesn't. Michelle usually kind of starts us off. So Michelle, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so today's headline sort of connects. It was a Harris poll that I saw about asking people of different age groups, 18 to 34, 35 to 54, and 55 and above, do they wish that we were back in the times when we weren't as connected via the internet and cell phones and things like that? And I was kind of surprised by the results that first off, all of the groups had a pretty sound majority saying, yes, I wish we didn't have this kind of connectivity anymore, and kind of going back to the past. But it was the 35 to 54 group was like 77%. They were the highest group that was in like strong agreement with that statement. And the everybody else was in like the 60 to 63%. So, wow, I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe it's a reaction to the AI stuff that's coming down the pike. You know, I'm not sure. But the other part of the poll that was of interest to me was, you know, is this just that they're trying to be like Luddite about this, or is there something else? And really 90% of the people were actually kind of pro-technology, like looked at technology as a positive thing for the most part. They were early adopters for the most part. So it was thought to be more of like nostalgia versus, you know, fully anti-tech. So, you know, with this topic today, social media use, and that's obviously a big part of that connectivity that was talked about in the poll. I just thought it would be a good thing to kick us off and just ponder, you know, why that group from 35 to 54 might have been so strongly, you know, reacting to that question, and really all the groups as well.
What do you think, Sal?
Well, I mean, you're essentially talking about Gen X, basically.
Yeah, right.
So,
it's older millennials and Gen X, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, a lot of that is nostalgia. I mean, if I were to take those same people and ask them the question, would you be willing to give up the convenience of X for Y, because Y is nostalgic, chances are a lot of them aren't going to give away I don't know, their Amazon Prime accounts or their Netflix accounts or whatever the case is. So, you're not going to stop technology from progressing civilization. It's just not going to happen. I mean, if that's the case, we'd be going back to horse and buggy at some point. All right. But that's just not the case.
That reminds me of the, what's that show? I'm going to remember it at some point, but they were it's like a comedy show, and they were talking about some place in Seattle-ish area and how it reminded them of the 90s. And they're like, the 1990s, I don't get it. And it was like, no, the 1890s. Everyone's making their own pickles. They're everyone's got the beards and, like chopping wood. So I think that's kind of maybe where you're going with that generation is kind of known for that, like, obsession with nostalgia.
I have a friend that lives in that area and does those things. And when he lived in Illinois, he did not.
It was Portlandia. I now remember.
Yes.
Yeah, Portlandia had that skit.
Oh, my Portlandia.
Yeah.
So good.
And it's a real, there's like a whole community of folks out there. But Portlandia didn't show that they also carry like 50 cal handguns because they're worried about getting eaten by a bear. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses. So.
Sure. But now that statistic kind of makes more sense. But I mean, I think the fact that all of the respondents were very much in favor of that, even those who hadn't even experienced the nostalgia, the 18 to 34s, So I don't know. I wonder if it is, with a lot of the stuff kind of ramping up, that exponential growth of some of the technology, people were just really negative on the bombardment, I think, that people are feeling right now.
Well, and so Chris and I were at an event yesterday, and we had a wonderful conversation with a gentleman. I want to say he's probably right around the 35-year-old age. And we were just talking about communication and the mass of communication, but communication doesn't equate to connectivity, right? And so whatever your platform is, whatever you're saying, if you're not finding common ground or, as Julius would say, positive commonalities, it's just communication.
Yeah.
And the mass of just communication is very overwhelming because, one, do we want to hear all this stuff? Two, do we believe it? I'm not a social media person because when I do go on social media, I get sucked in and I start, I'll lose hours because I can't handle it. But I know not everybody operates that way. Like my wife, without social media, she would wither and die. Like she gets her communication, but she's tapped into things that otherwise, I get my news from her because she filters it all to the stuff that I find relevant, and so I'll get my news.
Does it down for you.
Yeah, I'll get 5 minutes of news, of daily news. Like, these are the things that are important, and this is what people are talking about. You should know this.
Yeah.
Right. Like that submarine a little while back. I'm like, what is this? I don't even understand why everyone's beating up on this kid for not being more worried about his stepdad or something. I'm like, why?
She's your news aggregator.
Yeah. Like, why didn't you tell me about that? She's like, because it didn't make your cut.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, and Julius and I have had some debates over social media just in general, and you bring up a good point, this whole communication versus connection thing, right? We're so inundated with information right now, and we are probably the most divided that we've ever been, at least from my perspective. I mean, it's getting pretty petty out there if you look at social media. I mean, and everyone's an expert. Everyone is a full-fledged doctor, political scientist, lawyer, you name it. But there's really little connection happening because people aren't finding that common ground. And, it kind of makes you wonder whether or not part of it, and it's just me, at the risk of sounding like I'm about to put on a tinfoil hat, but how much of this is really engineered? There's a whole divide and conquer thing out there where, you do have, when you have a media complex, and this spans all media, they're making a ridiculous amount of money by sensationalizing things, driving people, driving wedges between groups, you name it. This is what's going to happen. I remember the day where, and this is my Gen X side coming out, when we used to say, man, can you imagine if everyone had just instant access to information, how much smarter people would be? Yeah, that's not the case.
Yeah.
You've gotten dumber.
Well, that I think that's what I was thinking about with this poll, is that it's like the sentiment is, I wish we didn't have this, but the action is, but I'm very connected and I'm very plugged in. And it's part of what you were saying in the tinfoil hat mode you were in. But it really isn't. It's that
I said the tinfoil hat mode that I was in.
Well, as you said, you put your hat on. That's all.
That's okay.
Was that these companies do know how to get into our brains. Mm-hmm. And so it does kind of control our behavior, even though this poll is clearly showing that the sentiment is, I don't want to be doing this, but I'm doing it anyway. Yeah. And it's making me feel bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's making me feel bad, but I can't stop doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's interesting. So Sal, part of, this is kind of looming question over our podcast has been, in the workplace, is it even possible to transform work culture, right? And I bring that up because this is a perfect example. So in this poll that you just mentioned, Michelle, it may be that people do feel like it's too much, right? But simultaneously, they feel like how could you possibly stop it, right?
Yeah.
So you have these two dueling possibilities that are there. Meanwhile, what Sal just talked about, there are powers above, all out of our control that are driving it. So every step towards, hey, maybe we should tamp this down. Maybe we should, get a little control over this. It's being driven the other way, right? And so I bring it back to.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're gonna say.
I'm saying tamping it down isn't. You're not going to be able to tamp it down. It's not. The beast is out there. I mean, that's just the reality. And look, social media has become the culture driver. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's whatever is being pumped through that driver, that's what's going to affect people. Whether good or bad, that's what's going to move the needle in whatever direction it's moving.
Yeah. Yes. Well, this is the perfect segue into the burning question part of our podcast. But before we go that, Sal, can you give all listeners out there a little bit of context of your background?
Sure.
That kind of, so that way when you start to talk about this, why everything that you have to say, kind of backs up what we're going to be listening to.
Excellent. So I am the CEO, the North American CEO of Ventla. It's an international company, software company. Basically, we build software for organizations to be able to distribute information efficiently to a group, whether it's employees, audiences, you name it, be able to interact and engage them in a fun and motivational way, and then be able to help facilitate networking amongst that group to really drive meaningful connections. My background is actually in human-computer interaction and human factors, as well as user experience. So I've been doing product development for 25 years, digital product development, with a focus on how do people interact with technology, and then how does it change them behaviorally over time. So this is a very interesting topic for me, because I've seen the behavioral change over time, because I've been doing this for about 25 years, and you see the change, especially in the workplace, on how people interact. Mm-hmm. And you're now seeing tools being built to really kind of, I shouldn't say mimic, it's actually doing the social media type of driving, but is doing it in more of a controlled space, which is really what our product is essentially. It's basically taking those concepts of social media, but driving it through a private channel that makes it more controllable, less kind of, out into the Wild West.
Okay. Yeah. So this perfect segue. So our burning question. So is social media a tool for collaboration and connection, or a distraction and source of conflict in the workplace? And I'm going to bounce that to you first, Sal.
Yes. Yes. It's
all of those things.
Two things can be true at the same time. So can it be a tool for collaboration and connection? Absolutely. I'll give you a perfect example, LinkedIn. All right. My entire sales team runs on LinkedIn. If it wasn't for LinkedIn, they wouldn't be able to build their connections, drive their messaging, build their business pipelines. They wouldn't be able to do any of that. They rely almost, I would say, 85 to 90% on LinkedIn. And it could also be a huge distraction and a source of conflict. Somebody sees something they don't like on Facebook that somebody posted, and next thing you know, someone's complaining to HR because they didn't like that person's comment. That happens. It happens a lot. Now, I think it all really distills down to which social media network. There was early in the social media game, all right, and there was, you guys remember MySpace? Prior to MySpace, there was Friendster. Most people don't realize that Friendster was one of the first ones. But Friendster got to the point where they got so big so quick that they collapsed under their own weight, and MySpace took over. MySpace turned into the Wild West. It was just this hodgepodge of hot garbage after a while that was constantly being shoved in your face. And it really turned into something, when you leave the internet to itself without any type of social engineering thought into it, it can turn into a pretty dark place, i.e., the 4chans of the world. Facebook came around, and Facebook was one of these experiments, and it was for all intents and purposes a engineered playground. And I say that because they started it in the school system. They only extended it to students and then teachers and then parents of those students. So it became this self-regulating environment. Because who wants to post some risque stuff, if their professors and their parents and their, siblings are on that same network?
Yeah.
So really that was kind of the foundations of success for Facebook. Now, it's definitely changed over time, and you're starting to see kind of this micro-focusing of social media channels. But every social media channel that comes out, i.e. a Snapchat, an Instagram, a TikTok, somehow impacts the population, especially when it comes to attention span. So now you're in a situation where these social media channels are starting to behaviorally change people, how they consume information, how they process information, what they're sharing. And depending on the channel is going to depend on the kind of content they're sharing or the kind of interactivity they're doing. Now, LinkedIn was engineered as a professional place. It was a place to build your self-brand, your network as a professional. So are there social media tools out there that are extremely productive? Yes. But then conversely, are there the ones that are just, playing on your pure entertainment factor and become a distraction? Absolutely. So that's why I really do think that burning question is kind of a yes all around. I mean, it really depends on what channel you're talking about and what kind of content they're interacting with.
So when we're, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, I was going to say, so when you're thinking about, do you start to think about they all have an impact on each other, and then how does that work? Do you go within the workplace? For example, like TikTok as an example, right? What's TikTok? Does TikTok, although maybe your your sales force is completely primarily in LinkedIn, does TikTok or Snapchat, does that start to impact the others in the way that it's being used?
I mean,
then how does that play into the workplace?
Does it impact others? Absolutely. I mean, look at some of the technology now that Facebook now has a feed a la TikTok where you basically just sit there. I mean, if you ever watch like a younger person or even people our age, in our age group, go traverse through these platforms, video. They don't stay long enough on a video. Like they're there for 5 to 10 seconds, and then unless it really, really catches their attention. All right. And they are starting to adopt as these new platforms come out that start changing people's behaviors, the other ones latch onto it. All right. So that's why Facebook acquired Instagram. That's why they released this kind of TikTok style feed in their platform, because they realize that that's how the masses, because they got so used to working in or consuming information a la TikTok style, they needed to do that too. Now, what does that do to the general population? It reduces attention span. All right. Now, here's the interesting part. There was a study done some years ago, probably about say 6-7 years ago. I have to remember what where the study was or who conducted the study, but basically what they found was that people's attention spans, while dropping significantly, at the same time, it didn't mean that they were getting dumber. What it meant was that they could only focus on information in short bursts over time, but at that same time, they could actually get more information from concurrent sources. You know what I mean? So yeah, sure, I can only focus on something for 8 to 10 seconds, but at the same time, I can also I'm getting all this information from various sources concurrently. Yeah, and which we've never been which. The human mind didn't really do that before. You were consuming things as, in more kind of structured order. Now it's like our brain is trying to make order out of chaos. And that's basically how we're consuming information right now. A little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. So, and you see this even with, as these kids are scrolling through these through these video channels, okay, little information, boom, next one. Little information, boom, next one. They're not getting the whole thing. Now, kind of steering away from this and kind of like what we're doing here, all right, long format podcasts. Now here comes the counterweight to that. All right. Before, people would watch shows for 30 minutes. Now they're watching a Joe Rogan podcast for 3 hours, and they're staying engaged. Now, they'll maybe do it in 30-minute increments or 1 hour increments, but they're getting through that whole 1 hour or 2 or 3 or 4 hours. So there are counterbalances in the world, but when it comes to social media, that's how people are consuming information now.
I think it can put a healthy burden on the deliverers of information to really crystallize it, right? And I'm not sure what your team has done on LinkedIn, if they're maybe posting videos or something like that, but instead of asking folks to give up 2 hours of their time, travel in, be at my meeting, and I'm going to explain to you all of the things that we do, to really be able to deliver it in ways that people can understand, that puts a different sort of flair on the way that businesses will be asked to communicate and be successful. If
you look at every major publication now online, what do? they have the long format, the entire article, and then up top they have here's the 5 to 10 bullet points.
Yeah.
That basically summarizes everything underneath.
Yeah. And it'll tell you up front, this is a 4-minute read or
Exactly.
7-minute read, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you want to dive into this right now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's great because there's some, especially advertisements. I like the podcast. I agree wholeheartedly. If something's interesting and it's driving great communication, I want to hear more. But there's an advertiser often that I see on YouTube, and I won't mention who it is, but it's always like this. I'm going to give you this golden nugget, but then you're going to have to listen for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to give you a hint at the golden nugget, and then if you're still with me, you're going to listen for another 10 minutes, and then I'm going to give you another hint at the golden nugget. I'm like, dude.
And 45 minutes later, you still can't figure out what
are you selling? What are you selling me? You're driving me nuts.
I hate that. It's so obviously manipulative. I'm just like,
right.
I'm not even.
And you get me
this.
once. You get me once. I watched the 45-minute video once to see that there's an offer for supplements, and these supplements will save my life. You lost me. If you would have, if right up front you would have said, "Hey, I've got these supplements that really change your life. If you want to buy now, click here."
Yeah.
If you need some more information, it's that funnel marketing, right? That I love that funnel marketing because it lets me make informed decisions. Like, I know what you're here for. I'm interested or I'm not. I can duck out at any time. Or if you've sold me, I don't have to wait for the rest of your 45-minute pitch.
Yeah.
I could just buy now. Right. So that was off on a tangent.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But Sal, so okay, so what I'm really interested in is then all that we've talked about. So how does that, when we start talking about like work culture, right? Mm-hmm. How folks are retaining the information in the short bursts and the long bursts. How does that play out in actual culture? How does that impact culture? Like, if you're giving direction for initiative, the spirit of the company, how does that play out?
Well, it plays out on how you communicate that. I mean, and how you reinforce it. So, one of the things that, and this, by no means am I trying to, make this a cheap plug for my product, but,
plug away.
What our company, one of our strong suits is the fact that you have this way. And part of the reason why we built Ventla was we saw that people weren't consuming information or interacting with information or hell, even interacting with each other the same way. So we basically look to the mobile device. People are always stuck to their mobile device. How do we leverage that to get better information distribution, better interaction, better networking? Delivering and reinforcing that culture is going to be key in any company. And you have to constantly be doing that in very creative ways. But one of the most efficient ways to do that is through the mobile device. Because it's something that people have placed more value on that little computer that's sitting right in front of you than any one thing in their lives. I mean, there is literally a clinical depressive state called nomophobia.
Oh my God.
Which is the fear of being without your phone.
Yeah.
That's how far down the rabbit hole we've gone.
It's so true.
And if I guarantee you, listen, if somebody takes my phone away, yeah, sure, I'll sit there and say good for like about 5 minutes. And then I'll start getting a nervous tick. And then I'm going to start panicking, wondering, who's calling me, who's trying to get a hold of me. As a client, need my help, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
So, it's, you have to really be able to deliver your culture message, your reinforcements of that culture in a way that is going to be sticky for the end user and really kind of bring them into the experience. Workplace culture is, everyone talks about workplace culture. A lot of companies that I've seen are good at formulating what they want, but not very good at delivering it or reinforcing it. And namely because in order to culturally disrupt an organization and move it into a better direction, you need to have full buy-in across the company. All right, that's number one. Otherwise, you're going to say that you're going to change something, but habits are a bitch.
Yes.
So, it's just the reality. The other thing is getting that deliverable out to the group and getting them to basically embrace it. That's a very difficult thing to do. And you have to be able to do it in a way that people are used to or at least interested in interacting in that way. One thing that I see a lot, especially, in the software development world is, at one time you used to have a bunch of developers in a room, right? That was kind of the old school way. Now, distributed workforces, all that. But the chat rooms, whether it was HipChat, whether it's, Google Chat, whether it's Teams, whatever the case is, that has become the watering hole, the development room, or the kind of community room, the scrum room, you name it. Mm-hmm. All right. You need to jump on a call with everyone. It's a click of a button. You need to kind of, talk through an issue. Everyone's on chat, proofing their code with each other. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the animated GIFs make it a fun place to be, so you start getting, this casual conversation amongst the group where they start really making connections with each other via chat. You can't discount the fact that social media had a huge impact on that. Mm-hmm. And that also drove a lot of social media as well. Having the ability to kind of connect in small bursts through messaging. I mean, now there are also, and I've seen these studies where people have a hard time now talking, and having long form conversations with other people because they're not used to looking somebody in the eye and having a conversation. Yeah. They're just used to texting. So, there's always a plus and always a minus.
Mm-hmm. So true.
Yeah. One thing that we do, as you know, we develop the framework, human-centered engagement. And when we work with clients, one thing that we try to do when we're looking at improving or enhancing work culture is when it comes to buy-in, there are exercise projects and things to get folks to buy in. But once they buy in, it's so important to create what we call like a work culture guide, right? Yep. Something where everyone kind of adds in what their vision, how they want to be treated, to how they want to work with projects, all in there, so that you actually have some type of kind of a foundation to work on, especially with all this high turnover that goes on. I mean, I can't imagine
cost to companies.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So, I mean, I couldn't imagine. I mean, it's always pretty evident for us why, organizations are having so many problems. Like, what are you reaching onto? You have all these individual thoughts that are going on, and you have these projects, and the projects in the beginning, if they're super interesting and organized, yes, they can keep everybody there. But the second that there's problems, now you got everybody individual, and you're dealing with multiple problems at the exact same time. So I think about that. So moving on to our next section.
Well, Julius, really quick before we move on, I just want to touch on something Sal said because it was really important. I think what we found is, as people are trying to go and incorporate culture change, when you do it simply top down, it doesn't have the right effect. No. And then I love what you said about habits, right? So leaders, we thought we can do this top down culture change, but then if we're not focused on our habits, right? We say we want a certain culture within our company, but then we're not changing what we're doing and the way that we're doing it and executing, it doesn't work. And that's why I think I love talking about it because we're really uncovering what doesn't work and what can work, right? We've seen the things that can work and the communication and that culture guide and having those disciplines and those habits. So I just thank you, Sal, for bringing all that up, because what I love about this podcast is like it's helping me realize I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one that thinks this way. There's other people, and and you've seen what works and what doesn't, and using these chat channels to try to and keep people engaged and be more productive. I love it.
Well, and the feedback loop too. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, the leaders are not the company. Everyone is the company. Mm-hmm. The company is made up of every individual that contributes to the greater organization. I don't care how low on the totem pole you are or how high of the totem pole you are. And at the end of the day, if in order to shift a culture, you have to have buy-in from that lowest rung to the highest rung. And in order to help facilitate the information retrieval part of that, being able to go out and say, hey guys, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? And give people a voice to say, you know what, I either really like it or I don't like it or whatever the case is. That little action alone, and I've seen this with our customers when they do polls to their employees. Just that little kind of pulse check makes a huge difference in how people perceive leadership.
Yeah.
And that is part of what changes culture too. Look, if I'm at the lower end of the rungs and I know that my boss or the CEO or the VP or whoever the case is concerned enough about what I think and is actually using, the collective's feedback to drive an initiative, that means something to me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to value that more. I'm going to be a more loyal soldier then. You can't, listen, I have seen companies that have this mass top-down approach, the old school kind of boiler room mentality, and that stuff does not work.
Not today.
Period.
Yeah.
All right, it doesn't work today. People do not value, look, the younger workforce does not value money as much as my generation. What they value is being a part of something. Mm-hmm. And if you can communicate that, if I can get my employees to feel like they're the ones that are driving the ship, sure, I'm going to help give direction. Listen, we need to go from here to here. All right, here's what resources we have. What do you guys think about this, about this, about this? That's going to make them feel more invested in the company than having to sit there, punch in, do a list of tasks, and leave.
And the key is that when you ask that question and you get the answer, that something happens related to that answer.
Yeah.
So that people trust the process, because you can stamp out that willingness to even share the opinion when the question is asked and then you go opposite without any explanation or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it speaks to the tenor and the culture of the leadership that's asking the question to build that trust with the workforce that I'm asking this question in good faith, answer in good faith, and then we'll work together from there. That's kind of rare, to be honest.
Which is, it's scary because it shouldn't be. I mean,
it shouldn't be. It's pretty simple.
We want feedback from our customers, don't we? Like, if something's not good, right? It's Starbucks, and so if you don't like something about that drink, Starbucks should want to know, because if you don't like it, you're not going to buy it again.
Of course.
Right? Why don't we have that as leaders? Why don't we have that desire from our employees? Right? Because especially now more than ever with different choices and globalization, people can work just about anywhere. It's the same kind of thing. If they don't like something, they're going to stop doing it. It's just not going to be part of their routine or whatever the case might be.
Sal needs to share something.
Here's my opinion. Okay. And this is just my opinion. So take it for what it's worth. Those leaders have never been in a small business before. Okay. Sometimes you get these leaders who, come out with, from their pedigree educations, they, work their way up some sort of ladder, or they have some sort of, clout already coming in, and they quickly skyrocket to the top, and they've never had to work the bottom. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I've seen this before. I've seen it even with people, in some cases with people that have worked the bottom, but they just don't want to understand the changes in today's workforce.
Yeah.
You usually see that with a lot of older older leaders who typically come from, I hate to say it, sales. Because and the reason why is because back in the day there was this very strong boiler room mentality that pin this person against this person, create strife, and then they're going to go at it, which means they're going to be more productive because they're going to want to slit each other's throats, and eventually whoever the person is that isn't bleeding wins.
Yeah.
Okay, it's that old Glengarry Glen Ross. Totally. First is a Cadillac, second place is a set of steak knives, third place you're fired. That's basically what that mentality is.
Fourth place, we're burning you out back.
Exactly. So that is that mentality. It's that boiler room mentality that does not work. I don't care what anybody says. We are in a different time now. People do not look. If I did that to my employees, I would have a mass exit.
As well you should, right?
Of course.
It's about thinking about people as expendable widgets, and so people pick up on that. And I think that's why the younger generation's like, I'm not doing that. I'm not playing that game. I saw what was played by my parents, my grandparents, whatever it might be. I want no part of that. And I really admire that generation for just standing firm and saying no.
Well, I mean, they saw what happens when you lose.
Yes.
You get fired. You get laid off.
They also saw what happened when you win, quote unquote win.
When you win.
You end up being sort of a shell of a human walking around. Right. You got this money perhaps, but are you happy? How are you interacting with your family? All that.
Yeah. And when you win 9 times out of 10, it should be great. Well, except you lost that one time, and that one time cost you.
Yeah.
And that's why I think with that, I mean, I'm young enough to see it and be like, I don't want any part of that either.
Yeah.
Like my average employee age is 30 and under.
Oh, wow.
Okay. My team has been with me for probably about 4 or 5 years now.
Unicorn.
Okay. I get this all the time. How do you get these young people to stick around? Literally, I had a friend of mine come into our office probably about maybe 3-4 weeks ago. Another business owner, and he's like, I don't understand. How do you keep these young kids motivated? Like, how do you keep them engaged like that? And I'm like, I include them.
I learn from them.
Every person here knows that they're valuable. They know what their worth is. They know what they're contributing to the company. And listen, I include them on decisions. I include them on reporting. Hey, here's how we're doing. Good or bad, you're going to know everything.
Yeah.
And I make that very clear up front. Listen, I want them to learn. This is not just me saying, you go do this, you go do this, you go do this. No, this is your opportunity because this is a tech company and I want you to be the star. I don't have to be the star. You guys are the stars. You guys are the ones that make things happen. I'm just the guy that helps facilitate things. You tell me to move a rock, I'll move a rock. But they're the stars in it.
Yeah.
And that's,
all right. Well,
that's why they're sticking around.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, I'll chime in just to say, I remember, just to see kind of where you are to this day. I remember, it had been like 15 years ago, probably, maybe a little bit longer, where I would be like, hey, Sal, after being just like, can we connect or whatnot? And you're like, oh, I got to go to another meeting. Yep. So it was just like, you went to so many meetings and then just like, oh my God, we got to go to another meeting, that you got involved where you know everything about how to create a meeting app, and how to create connectivity and engagement. So that's amazing. Yeah. So segueing to the next part of the podcast, which is called The Situation.
All right. Imagine you're the CEO of a startup company that operates in a highly competitive industry. You've noticed that your employees are active on social media, sharing company-related updates, and engaging with clients and industry professionals. However, you're concerned about the potential risks associated with the employee social media activity, such as unintentional disclosure of sensitive information or negative public perception due to individual posts. Okay, so here's the question. How do you strive a balance between encouraging employees to leverage social media for business purposes or as a brand ambassador while implementing measures to mitigate risks and protect the company's reputation?
Sure. So really simply put, we actually have a code of conduct clause in all of our employee agreements, basically stipulating, listen, this is what, if you are going on social media representing the company, that this is what we expect of you. You know, we expect you to not be posting atrocious content and making the company look bad. And that needs to be communicated. Listen, I'm not a fan of policing people's private social media accounts by any stretch. We do not do that. All right. But if you are on LinkedIn representing Ventla, yeah, there's a code of conduct. And if we find out that you are breaking that code of conduct, then that's a breach of contract. So, I mean, that's where you need to, as a business owner, as a CEO of any startup, when you start employing people, you need to really have a good understanding of what you can and can't do. All right. I can't stop somebody from expressing their opinion on their private Facebook page that's locked down. But what I can do is I could say, listen, if you're on social media representing the company, all right, and in our case, LinkedIn is a very popular tool for us, then we have a code of conduct. This is what we expect, and this is what we expect that you don't do.
Yeah. Have you had any challenges with that?
No.
Yeah.
We haven't. But we also have we regularly review certain things within the company, like code of conduct and, hey, what do you do if type of situations. We try to be more like mentors to our employees rather than telling them you can do this and you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, listen, what I'm telling you on how you should probably, hold yourself on social media isn't just for me. This is for you too.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to end up with is a situation where you're getting dragged through social media because you said something that you shouldn't have said.
Yeah.
Or posted something that you shouldn't have posted.
Yeah.
And I know nowadays everything has gotten hyper political and hyper, partisan, and, people get offended by a lot of different things. The way I approach it with my team is, listen, you got to try to be as kind of, level as possible. All right. There's no the best thing, at least, as far as like LinkedIn, first of all, politics, religion, all that, keep that to yourself. All right. I don't go around pushing my views. You shouldn't do that.
It's not
either.
a LinkedIn thing.
No, it's not. What you do on your private Facebook page, that's on you. But keep in mind, if you start inviting people as friends that are part of the company, now you're going to be held to a level of scrutiny because you're spilling that into the company. So you have to get them to understand where are all the lines.
Yeah.
I like that response, because the things I was thinking about around this question, one, I was like, well, I'm going to bring in my marketing expert. So really it's going to be Julius's meeting. It's not going to be my meeting because it's not my area of expertise. But the things that I would want, right? So you talked about boundaries, right? What are the limitations, right? And things to cross and not cross. The other thing I love that you said is you guys meet regularly and you provide mentoring, right? So you walk in and just I'm going to guess you guys talk about certain situations and what you might do to respond to a certain situation. And I'm going to guess that's collaborative, right? You bring in a bunch of people. So it's bringing in a dialogue to bring in the different opinions. And then you don't have to be the expert, which I love, right? I cannot stand when CEOs feel like they need to be the expert on everything or they can't have any conversations with the employees. That's just an unrealistic expectation to have today.
Yeah, if they say they are, then they're full of it. Listen, I know plenty of CEOs. You might be good at one or two or three things, but you're not good at everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they would say that. So what they don't do is get involved in the things that they're not experts at, which I think is a mistake because it doesn't inspire any kind of leadership.
Yeah.
Right. You can be somebody who inspires leadership by walking into a situation and saying, you know what, I'm not an expert here. You guys are experts, right? Can you help me get educated? Right. Yeah. What's going to make this better? I've seen that that's a win 100% of the time, even if it's a highly political and contested situation. If you do that, you walk away winning. You might have one or two people that are they're ready to quit anyway. So no matter what happens, they're going to be highly confrontational and they're just done. But if you can get over those couple individuals and really meet your masses, it changes everything. So I love that you guys do that. I think that's really great. That's what I would do in this situation, is bring folks to the table and do the same thing. So I love your answer, Sal.
So Sal, are you saying that so I get that you review kind of your protocols. Are you also saying that, like, when there are kind of hot button topics that are out there, you kind of bring those into the fold and talk about some of those things? Is that what you're also saying? Because I do see that as a, if you think it's just playing devil's advocate to just the individual, like at some point, things are going to be inside of you. You're retaining all this different types of information, and you're going to want to express them. And if you hold them in, at some point, it's going to come out, right? Yeah. So I as risky as it could be, I do see that in a more controlled environment, giving folks the opportunity to at least kind of, I don't know, share or kind of get a little bit of that out would definitely be more beneficial. Probably less likely for someone to use the company name and just be, because you gave them an opportunity to actually talk a little bit about it. So, but where's the line on that? Well,
I mean, you don't take a little air out of the tires by sticking it with a knife. So, it's. I try to, in a situation, let's say theoretically, right, where, someone came into the office and, for whatever reason went on a political tirade. All right. The first thing I would probably do is isolate that person, meaning bring them into my office, ask them if everything's okay. What's going on? Did you listen to a podcast and got fired up? What's going on here? The second thing that I would do is I would ask that person, just out of curiosity, how is this helping you professionally? Bringing this into the office. I mean, is this something that affects your work? 9.99999 times out of 10, it's not. Look, I understand the situation, and believe me, I've had plenty of situations where someone came in with personal issues. You try to be as empathetic as possible without stepping over the personal line, and let them gauge it. That's usually what I do. Listen, I'm going to show concern for you because I am concerned about you. Mm-hmm. And what you're willing to tell me, that's up to you. I don't want to get into your business, but if you feel like you need to unload, that's what I'm here for. I'm here for you. In the political sense, or whatever the case is, usually it's something that has nothing to do with them, or it's something that is, really kind of a straw man argument, for lack of better terms, that they get super, pumped up about. And like I said, they're usually listening to some podcast on the way in, or listening to some radio station, getting fired up, and then coming in with, with all types of ideas. And the first thing I do is I try to bring them back to reality. Listen, are you a senator? No. And, listen, if this is affecting your work, then maybe you need to take some personal time for yourself. But I don't think that's the case. I think that you probably got fired up. I understand. All right. But this is not going to help your work. And this is not going to help your relationship with other people here. Mm-hmm. So if it's not going to help you, then what are you doing? Mm-hmm. So it's just that's typically how I would frame that conversation.
Okay. So, but what if you sense that from a personal, from now we just covered kind of from the company aspect. Now, mm-hmm. from the personal aspect, how do you deal with that? Right. I mean, it's just
from a personal. You mean outside of my company?
Yeah.
Usually it's very similar. It's like, are you a senator? Are you a congressperson? No. What were you having this conversation for? I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. Me and Julius have had dude, how many hours have we spent going into social political issues that days, seriously, weeks. You would think that we were trying to solve the world's problems in one phone call. And that's the great part about, and this is, Jay, and I've told you this time and time again, this is one of the reasons why I love you, man, because we could have a conversation about anything. And it could be the most hottest of third rail issues. It could be something completely stupid. But we could have these debates, and at the end, we still love each other. I would take a bullet for you any day and twice on Sunday. And we don't have to agree about everything.
Yeah.
But we still love and respect each other. So usually in the situation where if I needed to, deal with that in a personal matter, I would first weigh in my head, really, how important is this topic to me? Do I really need to get into an argument about something that has nothing to do with me, or that I know only this much about? And then proceed from there. If it's something that I feel really passionate about, well, I'll explain to you, hey, here's how I feel about this. But, it's not going to change hopefully it doesn't change what you think about me, because it's not going to change what I think about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
There's a distinction there, right? So it's, when we're looking at social media and we're looking at, just getting back to the beginning of this conversation, right, where we were talking about this, people feeling overwhelmed, right?
Yep.
When I'm out there telling you how you should feel, how are you going to respond to me? Versus if I'm out there just sharing how I feel about something, the response is typically a little different. It's a little more like, hey, I feel this way because... usually invites people into a conversation.
People are craving authenticity, right? Yeah. So if you're stating who you are in an authentic way, and even in the conversations like you're talking about, Sal, you're comfortable in your relationship with Julius as you're having those conversations, and you're authentically sharing. You're not trying to change each other's minds. You're just sharing with each other, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you sleep, Julius, because I think there's too many of us that have those conversations with you.
Yeah.
Facts.
Well, I got to say, I like how Julius brought everything back full circle to this whole idea of needing to be able to have authentic conversations, because I think that's the one thing that social media has and going back to the very beginning, where, social media has, or I say certain elements of social media has kind of driven a huge wedge between people. And until we can get to the point where people can start having adult conversations again without, I think this, you're this, you're that, you're this, you're every name that you could possibly think of with an ist at the end. You know what I mean? It's like you can't you'll never be able to reach common ground.
Yep.
If you're going to sit there and beat people with a stick over and over again. All right. When we talk about making people feel included in the workforce, but if that's going to be the behavioral pattern that we're establishing, where you either follow what we say or we beat you with a stick, well, then the workforce is going to suffer dramatically because, listen, at the end of the day, behavioral patterns once they set in, they're hard to break.
Yep.
I think you said it earlier. Habits are a bitch.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's I don't know, a couple hundred books about habits.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Joe, go ahead and read the workplace story.
All right. In 2013, UK entertainment retailer HMV faced a challenging situation related to social media. Amid financial difficulties, the company had to lay off employees. During the process, disgruntled employees took to the official HMV Twitter account and vented their frustration about the layoffs. Their tweets, filled with candid remarks and grievances, quickly went viral and gained widespread attention. I wish I was on Twitter in 2013 to see this. The incident showcased the power of social media in shaping workplace culture and the potential reputational risks for organizations. It served as a stark reminder of the need for companies to establish clear social media guidelines, control access to official accounts, and address employee concerns effectively. So we just have a couple minutes left. Sal, I just wonder, given new technology, right? So these employees were disgruntled. They went to something they thought they had access to, which was Twitter, to vent. And I don't want to say venting is bad. If we say venting is bad, you
shut the door.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a leader and you think venting's bad, come talk to me, and I'll change your mind by venting for several hours. No, just kidding. But I'll explain to you the opportunity, right? And I just did this earlier this week with somebody, and it was amazing. But given the new technology, right? Is there a different approach? Right? Or is there something that HMV could have had in place to allow employees the opportunity to vent about something that really, I'm sure it rocked them, right? Their friends are losing their jobs. If they're still with the company, they get more stuff on their plate. How might new technology solve that in a way that gives employees a healthy outlet, and creates additional engagement inside of a situation that's very, very difficult? Layoffs are always difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I don't want to sound like this is a sales pitch for Vetla by any means, but I mean, we had a similar situation with a client who was going through layoffs. Essentially, what they did was they basically built a information channel / feedback loop for their employees to be able to express their concerns, understand more. They were constantly posting kind of up to date, little 30-second videos. Hey, here's what's happening right now. This isn't your fault. This is because of XYZ, but the company's having problems right now. We're unfortunately going to have to do, this, and we're trying to be there for you, including the people who are going to, unfortunately, be let go. You have to have, as a responsible business owner, you not only have to have the channel for to be able to get to your employees quickly and give them an opportunity to have that feedback loop, But you also have to, in a situation like this, be able to have some sort of program in place where you can help those who are about to get affected, whether it's the people that are being let go or whether it's the people who are going to remain and end up bearing the brunt of the work. All right? Because it's not a good situation for either folks. I have seen some really, really great leaders in my lifetime, in my 25 plus year career, and I've seen some really shitty ones. Okay, just being as candid as possible. And I've seen situations where leaders make poor decisions, and the workforce ends up taking the brunt of the the axe. So, and the leaders usually end up, going scathed, unscathed. That's part of that's part of the reason why I started my own business. My father, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. My father came to this country from Sicily. Both of my parents did. They built a business, still thriving today. And I remember when I graduated college and my father told me, he walked up to me, he's like, I'm proud of you. You're going to go out there, go learn, go, find the work that you want to do and go see how other people do things. But I want you to remember this. You're better off selling peanuts on the street corner. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, Dad, I just got a degree. I'm not going to go sell peanuts. So he's like, no. He's like, you're better off doing that because you can sell as little or as many as you want to. And if you succeed, it's because of you. And if you fail, it's because of you. And I never understood that until I worked for this company. I won't name any names, large software company. The CTO had made some awful decisions. To the point where myself and another fellow who I worked with were literally going to him saying, look, this is a really bad idea. Here's why you need to pump the brakes on this. But because he had sold this to the CEO as the greatest thing since sliced bread, he basically was not going to listen to us. So fast forward, they released this product. It crashes within 12 minutes of going live. They ended up losing $3.5 million in total because they ended up having to scrap the whole thing. Ask me if that CTO lost his job. Ask me if his VPs lost his job. None of them lost their job. You know who lost their job? Developers, QA people, people at the lower end of the totem pole. Because, we didn't make that money. Now we got to make that money up somehow. So this is where, that whole idea of if you screw up, if I lose, it's because of me. You know what? I would personally rather take that onus than put it in the hands of somebody else. And the reality is, in that case, right, where somebody is going to have a situation where they need to lay off a bunch of people, unfortunately, it's usually the lower end of the rung that gets hosed first. And the people that end up causing the problems end up walking away unscathed.
Yeah.
No, sometimes they they're found out, but
usually takes a few rounds.
I think that's where the tweets come from because they see that pattern too, and it's just so frustrating for people.
And the easiest way to get around that is to have a good communication channel.
Yeah.
Right. Have an ability to be able to, for those people to be able to vent and to be able to, submit their concerns, but also give them, not just the people who are still there, but the people who are about to leave. Give them something to make them feel like they're still cared for.
Yeah. And give them a channel to vent within the company,
Of
like
course.
you were saying.
Of course.
I don't know if you saw that episode of Succession when Greg was laying off everyone and just put everyone on mute and ended the call as soon as the news was out. Okay, that's when you're going to create this kind of situation.
I know people that have done that, and their response is, HR didn't equip me with what I need to say to folks, so I'm just not going to say anything because I don't want to get fired.
Yeah.
And how do you,
You're a hostage.
well,
Basically,
yeah.
You're a hostage.
It's that HR gave me 15 minutes notice that we're going to have this call, and then I need to clean up, but I don't know what to do, right? And HR probably got the call 30 minutes before.
Yeah.
Right? And because there's this false sense of having, if we don't tell people what's going on, they won't be able to react to it in this way of, they won't have access to our Twitter account, right? So we just won't, right up to the moment, right? We'll make sure security's there waiting to clean out their desk. Or, back in the days when we were all in the office, we'll bring them into this meeting room, we'll have a 2-hour meeting, and somebody's out cleaning out their desk. And then as they walk out this meeting, here's this box.
That's messed
it's
up.
Happened.
Brutal.
It's happened.
Brutal.
But
right?
that's perception too. You look. Do you not think that other people in that office are seeing this happening?
Oh, for sure.
And what's going through their head? This is the part that I do not get with especially the larger companies that, in most cases is usually what's happening in the larger companies, where they're basically just ransacking people's desks, shoving everything in a box and saying, here, get out. By the way, and security's going to meet you downstairs to take your badge.
Right. And and if you had anything, we're okay with you doing some personal stuff on your laptop and right? Like all the fun stuff and the nice things when you get hired. Then you're like, hey, but I have some of my personal documents are on my work laptop. Can I have my personal folder with my personal documents?
Yeah. And
can I have my work? Can I have my portfolio, if you will?
Meanwhile, the team that you worked with for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they're still all sitting there watching this unfold. And you've built a connection with those people. They now feel connected to you. How do you think that's going to make those people feel?
Yeah. Well, and especially if they didn't think you were the bad person on the team, right? It's like, because everyone's got that opinion of if we're a team of 10 people and somebody's got to get laid off, you've got your top 3, right? Like this person, or this person, if they're gone, right?
Yeah.
But when it's not that person and you're like, but that person was really good. What happened? Like that.
Well, you wonder why. Well, you wonder why trust is at an all-time low. So that'll be, because we didn't talk a lot about trust. And so I'm very happy that we got to authenticity because you said it at the end, Michelle, but that's what you were describing in some of the things that you were talking about, Sal. But yeah, trust in, how does trust play into all of this? And then, again, going back to that looming question over the entire podcast, which is like, how can you transform work culture, right? Is it really possible when you have, folks who seemingly don't care, right? I mean, in the end, it almost feels like they don't care. That's why you get to that when you're saying that, Sal. Like, I don't see how you're watching this unfold, but it happens over and over and over again. So you have to question in the end: do they really care? Is it really important?
Yeah, that's why you need full buy-in.
Right.
Yeah,
that's why you need full buy-in.
And if you're in a situation where you're feeling like this, we understand that apathy can come in, right? If you're a leader and you feel powerless, like we're not trying to crap on you.
No,
get a hold of us. We get apathy is a super huge problem where you feel like you have no control and you don't know what to do and you don't know how to do it. We'll have links on how to connect with us. Connect with us. We'll have, we'll at least let you have a 30-minute conversation for free so you can vent. Because leaders need to vent too.
That is true.
Absolutely. Awesome, Sal. So this has been an amazing conversation. We would love to invite you back at some point.
How many minutes are we over? That's what I want to know.
We're good.
The studio said we're okay.
See, this is what you get for inviting an Italian to come into a podcast. Conversation goes straight past the time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sal.
Oh, thank you guys.
And all of actually, wait, because we have gone over a little bit, but I do want to give Michelle last words. Do you have any last words?
Yeah, just really enjoyed the conversation. Love getting your perspective. What's in my mind is sort of that, I feel like there's something about the leaders who have companies who kind of came up from, you have an immigrant background, people who've kind of worked in the trenches and then become leaders. Like that's kind of lingering in my mind as one of the ways that we can make sure that humanity focus is remaining in our workplace.
Yeah.
Joe, last words.
So many things, Sal. Love hanging with you again. It's been far too long.
Yeah, man, it was fun.
We got to figure out some ways to work together because love what you guys do. Love your way of doing things. Julius definitely would try to like to figure out a white paper, but the one thing I'm really left with is, hearing the stories, right? And hearing how you're in a situation with this company that, the frontline employees that were doing the work that might not have been in a good situation, put in a bad light, those are the ones that got fired. You're stopping that progression, right? I just see you as somebody who's like not at my company. And so I thank you and I applaud you for that. And
Thank you.
Look forward to so many more conversations.
Awesome, man. Same here. No, I appreciate I appreciate all you guys having me here. This was a lot of fun. And hopefully you'll be invited again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sal, last words for anything that you'd want to leave listeners with or based on the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, don't be afraid of technology. I think a lot of people try to look, and we kind of got into this conversation earlier where, when I said, listen, you're not going to stop technology from progressing. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's this kind of false idea where, somehow you're going to bring things back to the old glory days of not having a cell phone and not having internet at your fingertips. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. All right. So, I mean, while it may sound nice, you know what? Shut your phone off for a day, see how long it takes for panic to set in, and then we'll talk. But, if you need to get away, sure, shut your phone off, go to Door County or something, or, Amish country or wherever.
I recommend turning your phone off for at least 4 hours once a month.
Hey, I agree
and
with
not
that.
while you're sleeping.
True.
Not while you're sleeping.
True. No, I agree with that. But I think what leaders need to start doing is understanding what the trend is in behavior and in human computer interaction. And not try to force it back, but try to figure out creative ways to leverage what's happening at that moment. The best leaders out there, the strongest CEOs out there are the ones that are out there leveraging the technology. They're getting their messaging out there. They're being effective communicators. They're hosting podcasts. They're creating these social media vignettes that they're putting out there. They didn't have to do that, but they did it because they understood that was the best way to get it out, to get their message out there. Mm-hmm. So embrace it.
Awesome. Sal, and where can folks find you these days if they want to learn more about your company and you?
Ventla.io. So if you go to ventla.io, that's our website. You can always reach me at sal@ventla.io. So it's a VENTLA. And that's usually the best. That or find me on LinkedIn. Salvatore. Camarda.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you guys again for another awesome conversation. This has been another episode of the Workplace Theater Podcast. And thank you all. And we hope to hear from you soon. And until next time.
See you soon.
If today's discussion resonated with you, don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button now, leave a review, and rate Workplace Theater. Your support helps us improve. Do you have questions or comments? Click the link in our show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning into the Workplace Theater.
We hope you've enjoyed our podcast. If you're interested in new ways to inspire your team,